คุณเรียนผิดความจริงเกี่ยวกับเทคนิคการเรียนที่เป็นที่นิยม
In this video, I'm going to rank the most common methods from the worst to the best. Some of the techniques you're using every day are actually keeping you stuck, while others are insanely powerful if you use them the right way. So before you waste another hour studying, let's see where your favorite method really lands on the tier list. Now, if you're new here, I'm Tom, a study coach, and I help students from medicine, engineering, law, business, all the way to people studying next to a full-time job. And I've tried almost every study method on myself and my students. And I don't care what feels nice. I care about what actually works based on real research and real exam results. Let's build this tier list. Here's how this will work. For each method, I will give you two rankings. How students usually use it and how good it can be if you actually use it properly. Because most methods are not good or bad by themselves, but they're just often used in a terrible way. Our tiers are going to be the S tier, the must use. These are going to give you a score of 90 to 100%. A tier is very strong, probably gives you a score of 80, 90% on an exam. B tier is decent, gets you 70 to 80%. C tier is meh, gets you probably like in the 60, 70 range. D, almost useless, 50 to 60. And F tier, please stop using this. It will lead to failing grades, like a lot of time spent, not the grades that you want. So let's start with some of the methods that most people secretly rely on. Rereading and actually highlighting. They are going into this F tier. You know this one. You open the textbook, you read, you highlight random sentences. It feels productive, but you forget everything 2 days later. So it's super frustrating. Most students live in this tier still. We are spending about 13,000 hours at school and nobody teaches us how to learn, so a bunch of people just do this. It gives you a nice feeling of familiarity, but your brain is not actually being tested, so that means you're not building real memory for understanding. It means that people often read the same notes over and over again and again, which is not going to get you the results that you are looking for. Research has found that there were 3 study groups. Number A highlighted the text and did an exam. B learned from the highlighted pieces of text of student A and took the exam. And group C, they just took the exam without highlighting at all, and all of them scored approximately the same. There was no significant difference. So highlighting goes into F tier. It's mostly fake work. It feels like study, but doesn't really stick. So it can be useful, so it might go to a D tier if you are using it to skim and scan before classes. But if you don't go into active recall, it's just trash. Let's move to the next one, which is watching videos and recorded lectures. I'm going to put that into D tier. YouTube lecture captures, online course videos. Most people just press play, take a few notes and call it studying. But the problem is still the same. It's quite passive. So you watching this video and just sitting and nodding along, your brain just doesn't have to work. You're only consuming. So what most people do is they watch it at 1x or 2x speed, but they're not really processing the information, nor are they actively recalling information. You're just copying what is being shared on the slides, which doesn't make sense. It goes into D tier. It's not bad. It's better than nothing, but it's also not super active. If you want to move this up 1 tier to C tier, you would have to turn every video into smaller practice questions and an answer session. Every 3 to 4 minutes, just pause and ask, okay, if the video stopped here and the exam started, what would they ask me about this video? And you convert that information into shorter pictures. Write these questions down and then test yourself on them. The next method is about studying with music. Also goes into D tier, especially when you're listening to music with lyrics. It can be quite distracting. If you listen to binaural beats or lo-fi, that might be okay. However, music with lyrics competes with the words that you're trying to read, so therefore it distracts you, and then your brain has to split attention, which usually lowers the memory and the accuracy of your study session. Studying in silence versus studying with music often show equal or worse performance with music, especially when the task is complex. Do not study with music. Ideally, do not have your phone next to you to change numbers if you dislike it. Ideally, work and study in silence. If you choose to study with something, do binaural beats or classic Baroque music. Let's go to some methods that are actually good, but probably still not getting you the results that you're looking for. This takes you a very long time to write like a summary of all the chapters and all of the notes. You shrink it into a shorter page. However, this is still not active recall. You're most of the time just copying from what's in the textbook, but you're just making it less text. Like, it's great to then have that information and convert that information of your summary into practice questions, which will give you way better results. But just the fact and the task of summarizing itself is not going to benefit you. So if you indeed want to move this up to the B tier, then you should write the summary either from memory after you've read something or you've watched a video, or you are converting all of that information into practice questions instead of a summary, such that you have a summary with aka question bank of the whole material, which will make it a C tier, more active recall already there. The next method that I will do is brain dumping. I will also place that into C tier. It is great for just like blurting out the information that you've just studied. You can take like a blank page and try to write everything down from memory. The impact is good. However, the problem is that you're not really testing yourself eventually in a level that you're going to be tested on as if you are in an exam or like in a real pressure setting. So this method is quite good for early learning stages, but as soon as you did it once, maybe max twice, you should move forward to other learning methods. So also here, when you want to upgrade it, I would highly recommend that you make it more structured, do a brain dump before your learning sessions, maybe before your class. That way it can be beneficial. The next one that I had in mind here was to do mnemonics. Mnemonics are like really good for remembering large bits of information. So it's like acronyms, little sentences, weird images. Example that we can give is remembering the colors of the rainbow. Richard of York gave birth in vain means red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And that means every first letter, Richard, red, O, orange, York, yellow, gave, green, etc. It helps you to remember huge chunks of information. We often apply and advise our students, especially in medical fields, law, or engineering, that have to remember like complex formulas, to use acronyms like this. It would go into B tier for now. If you are making it an A tier and you try to do it with every like large piece of information that you have, it can help you significantly with difficult memorization questions on your exams. However, it's still not going to be A/S tier completely, because it's still not close to learning under pressure when you are doing exams. Let's move into the higher impact tiers a little bit. I'm first going to move flashcards also to the B tier, where I might step on the toes of a bunch of medical students here. But the truth is, you're not only going to be tested on definitions and concepts, like you are going to be tested eventually if you can evaluate and assess a patient. If you can only say and memorize concepts and definitions, you're not in the position yet to do critical thinking and a proper analysis where you compare two potential diseases and based on all of the different symptoms that a patient has, make an accurate decision. Like a flashcard doesn't do that. Flashcards are great when you have large chunks of information to cover and to memorize. However, move it up to the A and the S tier, you do need to get into more case study learning, practice questions that are more dense rather than just simple flashcards here. The next one is going to be Pomodoro method. I would also place this in B tier just for the sake of how the Pomodoro method is set up at this moment. A lot of people think 25 minutes, 5-minute break, 25 minutes, 5-minute break. Again, this works insanely well if you are dealing with a shorter attention span. And if you are literally training yourself to be more focused and more concentrated. At the problem is that often your brain needs about 23 to 25 minutes to literally warm up. Same as with a physical workout, you need to warm up your brain. And with these 25 minutes, hey, all of your warm-up time is gone and you're going into a break. So if you want to move this to A or S tier, I would highly recommend that you extend your sessions, that you almost move to 40 minutes of work and then a 10-minute break, maybe even 50 minutes of work and a 10-minute break. or even 60 minutes of work and then a 15-minute break. So if you are going for more deep focus, maybe a 1 or a 2 hour study session, again 60 minutes with 10 minutes and then do this twice, it's going to be way more effective than just studying for the 25 minutes and then taking a break already. The next method that I want to dive into is going to be pre-studying. This is often called priming. I'm going to put this in A tier because this is where learning eventually starts. It's not about what happens after class or during class, it's what happens before class. Your brain has one limitation that we often like to call rejection, and this basically means that if it's never has seen or heard about the information yet, it is easy to forget. This means there's no neural pathway or network in the brain yet, and therefore if you are providing it this new information, it's just going to be lost. However, if you do pre-study and you are already identifying what the core concepts are, what the main topics are, and maybe even already what kind of questions you have or you are uncertain about, you can be way more specific with going into the lecture, learning there, asking the teacher questions, and then solving your knowledge gaps. This is super effective. The method that we usually advise students to apply with pre-studying is the SQ3R method. We do have a video on my page about this method because it's super useful. Start using that SQ3R method and it might even help you going into S tier studying. Now let's go to active recall. For sure, A tier, it's going to give you 80-90%. Almost guaranteed. If you do this throughout your whole learning journey, this is going to get you the best results. However, how you are applying active recall really depends. So if you want to move it to an S tier, we want to be actively recalling information with an increased difficulty of the questions that we ask ourselves. So what do I mean with that? There's different layers of learning, remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Most students still get stuck on remembering and understanding questions. And if you are capable of leveling up your questions to application, evaluation, and analyzing, you're applying active recall at tier level. So most students get stuck here in the A level. I highly recommend to increase the difficulty of your retrieval practice questions such that you can move into tier and get higher grades there. That brings me also to the next method, which is super famous, the Feynman technique. Definitely A tier as well. So basically what you do is you grab a topic, you teach it as if you are teaching a 5-year-old, and then you're going to identify your knowledge gaps. Where are you making mistakes and what does that eventually lead to? If you make the mistakes, what is the knowledge gap? You can restudy it again with any active recalling methods, or maybe indeed it is a matter of flashcards or mnemonics, and then you teach it again and you practice this information again. Spaced repetition, A tier for sure, because it beats short-term memory. With spaced repetition, you basically spread out your learning over an extended period of time. What we usually advise students to do is that if they went to a class or they studied something today, they repeat it about an hour, 2 hours later, they repeat it 1 day later, they repeat it 1 week later, they repeat it 4 weeks later. Note, ideally you combine this with the different active recalling, an increase of challenging questions such that you are also, training your brain to solve more complex problems instead of just doing flashcards with spaced repetition, which keeps you in that B tier. So spaced repetition, super useful if applied correctly and with the right learning methods. So for example, your first repetition should be before class, pre-study. You go into class, you do active recall, for example, the Feynman technique. And then after that, 1 day later or 1 week later, you do practice retrieval questions with active recall. And then the final one is mock exams, goes straight into S tier. And here's why. Because there's nothing better than to test yourself as if it's a real exam. This way, you're building the muscle of practicing under real pressure. And this means that you're going to do practice questions not 1 day, or a practice exam not 1 day before the exam. No. You're going to do this already 1 or 2 weeks before your exam is actually happening. Why? Because then you can clearly see A, what type of questions are going to be coming up, and B, where your knowledge gaps are, such that you still have plenty of time to recover them with any of the other A tier methods methods, the pre-study, the active recall, feynman technique, or spaced repetition. Plus, these days, it's super easy to make practice exam questions with AI, with cloud, ChatGPT. Also, we created a whole video on my channel about this, even giving you the exact prompts that I would use. And with this, our students are getting like guaranteed 90% plus on each exam, whether they are in law, medicine, or engineering, by far the best method. Now, if you want to learn more about all of these individual methods, the A and the S tier methods, make sure to check out the next videos on my channel such that you get the most value from them and start to learn how to actually implement them.
เว็บไซต์นี้สามารถช่วยพัฒนาทักษะการอ่านและการฟังภาษาอังกฤษของคุณได้เป็นอย่างดี ด้วย AI ประโยคภาษาอังกฤษจะถูกแยกเป็นวลีสั้นๆที่เข้าใจง่าย คุณปรับความเร็วหยุดหรือย้อนกลับได้ตามต้องการเพื่อให้เข้าใจทุกประโยคเว็บไซต์รองรับการแปลถึง 20 ภาษาทำให้การเรียนรู้เป็นเรื่องง่าย เพียงพิมพ์ใน as.com ในเบราว์เซอร์ของคุณแล้วลองใช้ได้เลย